The following program is brought to you by the Internet Broadcasting Organization. Nothing stated by Steve Bartlett during the Fight Back with Steve show is intended to be legal advice, and appearing on the show does not create an attorney-client relationship with Steve Bartlett. Before taking legal action, it is advisable to consult with an attorney of your choice. The views and opinions expressed by the callers and guests of the Fight Back with Steve show are solely opinionated by those individuals and are not necessarily the expressions and viewpoints of Steve Bartlett or Talkwat Studios.
Hi, I'm Steve Bartlett. Welcome to Fight Back. It's Monday night, 9 o'clock. So tonight, again, we're going to talk about political and legal issues and how they impact you. But before I get that, I want to congratulate my Tampa Bay Lightning for making it to the playoffs. Not only that, but they won without their star goalie with a shutout in the last game of the season to secure home ice against Les Habitants, the Montreal Canadiens, in round one of the playoffs. Way to go, Bolts. That's how you fight back. After a bad season last year, and the year before that, after losing your superstars, Steven Stamkos, after losing your best player, Marty St. Louis, to a trade, and after having your starting goalie go down with injury, you still were able to kick ass this year. Way to go, Lightning. That's how you fight back. Now, tonight's topic is reminiscent of a song at Disney World that they sing, and that song is "It's a third world after all. It's a third world after all. It's a third world after all. It's a third world after all." I'm here to talk to you tonight about how the United States is gradually declining to become like a third world country. Now, back in the 1950s, the countries around the world were defined as being three different ways. The first world countries were the countries which were democratic, which had a high standard of living, were countries where it was relatively peaceful, which were not backward societies. And these countries were led by the United States, of course, Canada, and the European countries as well, at least in Western Europe. That was considered to be the first world. The second world were considered to be countries that were behind the Iron Curtain, the communist countries. And the third countries, which is called the third world, were the developing countries, which were mostly in South America, Central America, Africa, and Asia. These were the countries that were economically poor, undemocratic, poor health care, high crime, just backwards, poor, disenfranchised countries. And what the show's about is how the United States for years has always claimed superiority. And we had every reason to. We are the richest country in the world. We have done a lot of great things. There's a lot of things that Americans should be proud of. However, our country is resting on its laurels, and we're not always going to be this way. America is declining, and this show is supposed to be like a wake-up call about how our standards are actually changing, and our country is gradually declining and becoming more of a third world country. Now, when I'm saying what is the third world country, this is what I'm talking about. There are certain areas that we've historically defined third world countries as being like. One is dangerous. When you think of a third world country, you think of a country where you can get abducted in the night, like the Middle East or in Africa, where it's not safe, where people can be high crime areas. That's something that when people think of a third world country as being a type of country where you can't walk the streets because crime is so rampant. There's high murder rates. That's one of the elements of a third world country. Another is a lack of democracy. Third world countries tend not to be democratic. There's normally military juntas in control in which people who run things have all the power, and the poor, suffering people who are the citizens, they don't have any power at all, and they're oppressed, and they don't have any individual rights or individual freedoms. Another element of the third world country is that people's political enemies get put in jail. They don't believe in trial by jury. They believe in executing people with the firing squad. When you think of the right-wing dictatorships in the Central America in the 1950s and 1960s, that's what you think of. You think of people just going to the firing squad without a trial, or the government just killing people on a whim. That's an element of a third world country. Economic inequality is another element of a third world country. Like if you look at countries such as India back in the 1950s or 60s, beautiful country, beautiful landscaping, but beautiful scenery, beautiful culture, but a lot of poverty. And people in India or the other third world countries had a very, very large group of people who were very poor, and a very, very small group of people who were very rich, and the middle class wasn't in existence. So you were either really rich or really poor, but there wasn't anything really in the middle. That's another characteristic of a third world country. Or the healthcare system. You look at the healthcare system of countries like Bangladesh, or in Africa, where the life expectancy is not that high, and people die at a very, very young age, and there's a high infant mortality rate, and there's not a good sense of health care. That's another basis for a country being considered to be a third world country. And finally, another element, I guess, of being a third world country is having really bad infrastructure, being backwards, not having running water, not having electricity, being behind the curve when it comes to modern type technology. So those are the big things that makes a country seem to be a third world country versus being a first world country. And although the United States clearly is a first world country, we are the richest, we are the strongest, number one, USA, 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 just saying that over and over ago doesn't make it true, and things are cyclical. Powers rise and fall. Countries and empires get strong and then gradually get weak. It happened with the ancient Greeks. It happened with the Romans. And it will happen to us if we don't pay attention to the signs. If we just rest on our laurels and just tell each other how great we are as Americans, then we won't pay attention and our country will decline. And I don't want our country to decline. I want us to fight back. I want America to be great again. But we have to be aware that we are getting to be closer to being a third world country than we'd like to believe. And that's what I want to talk to you about the show tonight. Now, I've had this idea for many years about the decline of America, how we're getting less and less to be the America of the ideal state, that our dreams of being an American and being in a country which is free and rich and powerful and democratic is more of a illusion and more of a dream than a reality anymore. And I like to make that reality, the way America can be. We have to try to make it that way again. But even though I've had this idea for a while, the reason I'm doing the show is I was reading Rolling Stone magazine, and a guy named Sean McElway wrote an article about how the United States is becoming a third world country, and that made me think. And I'm like, well, why don't I talk about that on the show tonight? So that's why I'm talking about this tonight on the show, about America becoming a third world country, because I read this article on Rolling Stone, and I don't want people to call in going, "Hey, man, you just came up with this stuff because you read it in Rolling Stone. You're not a free thinker. You don't think of anything on your own." Well, I do think of things on my own. I talk about it all the time on the show, but I thought this was so interesting I wanted to share it with you. So. And of course, I want your opinions. I want you to call. I got the number flashing on the screen. So right now, there's no excuse for people not calling in. Call with that number, which you can see right there on the screen if you can count. If you know how to use a phone that has buttons on it, and you push the buttons, and after you get done pushing the buttons, someone answers the phone, and I will talk to you. So if you have any comments, please call. I know sometimes the phone number doesn't flash like it's supposed to, but I want you to call tonight because I want to talk to you. I want to hear your opinions. But let's go why I think America is gradually becoming more of a third world country. Let's start talking about each of the areas that I discussed before. Okay, well, like I said, the third world countries, people there don't have a real sense of justice. The criminal justice system in third world countries is absolutely horrible. People don't have a right to trial by jury. People don't have the same rights that we have in this country. However, the rights that we have in our country when it comes to criminal law are beginning to change. We are losing our rights all the time. The Supreme Court keeps coming down with decisions which limits our right of privacy. It allows police to violate the laws when it comes to search and seizure. It's easier for the police to get into your home now. There's more exceptions than there were before. It seems as if the constitutional protections under the Fifth Amendment are gradually being chipped away. Same with the Sixth Amendment, which is the right to counsel. 5 years ago, if you told a police officer, I'm not answering any questions, they could never question you again if you said, I wanted a lawyer. But now if you tell a police officer, I'm not answering questions, I want a lawyer, they have to leave, but they can come back and harass you a little bit later. And then everything going on with the government being able to listen to your phone conversations without a warrant, with the NSA and the whole idea of drone strikes, being able to kill American citizens without giving them any due process rights. This is all disturbing behavior, showing that our criminal justice system is changing, that we're becoming more of like a third world country when it comes to the protection of human rights and human liberties. The most blatant violation of human rights, which makes us seem like a third world country, is our policy towards the death penalty. The United States is the only westernized democratic country in the world that has the death penalty. It's been abolished all through Western Europe. It doesn't exist in Canada. We are the only industrialized Western country to have the death penalty. We're similar to North Korea, to Soviet China, Red China, to North Korea. That's whose company we're in, the way we execute people. It's actually appalling that a country that is supposed to be about being civilized executes people. That's something that you would expect the military right-wing junta to do, not a beacon, the shining hill, the shining city on the hill that Reagan described. Also, third world countries tend to put people in jail a lot. You do anything, you disappear in the middle of the night and you get put into jail. Well, the United States, one of the things that we are number one in by far is the amount of people that are incarcerated. More Americans are put in jail than any other country in the world. We incarcerate more of our population per percentage. More Americans per 100,000 are imprisoned than any other country in the world. We put more people in jail than China does, than Russia does, than Iran does. We are number one in incarcerating our citizens. And then once they get out of incarceration, they're unable to be part of society again. They are taught how to be criminals. They are unable to get jobs. They're unable to integrate back into society, and that's really disgraceful as well. That's what you expect from a third world country, not what you expect to a country with a history of greatness like the United States. Not only that, but the people who are placed in prison are disproportionately African American. It's wrong that if you're African American, you're more likely to end up in prison than if you are white. Even with the same charges, you are more likely to go to prison if you're black than if you're white. A disproportionate amount of African Americans are in prison than there are in every other westernized country in the world. Someone called. Thank you. Hi, this is Steve.
Yes, this is the Walrus from Palm Harbor.
Hi, Mr. Walrus from Palm Harbor. How are you tonight?
Another liberal rant of yours. Typical liberal left-wing media. You yearn about the high incarceration rate in the United States, but you fail to mention crime is down 40%. Where are those in your statistics?
Well, if
You care to comment?
if crime is down 40%, and it is, why do we have why do we have more Americans in prison than ever before? Why are we continuing to build more prisons and put people in prison? Why is there, twice as many people in prison right now than there used to be when crime isn't as high as it used to be? And the one type of
crime is down 40%. What don't you get? I mean, do the math.
Then why do we put people...
40% decrease in crime, highest criminal incarceration rate in the world. Do the math.
And we're also number one, but we're still number one when it comes to murder. We're still the most dangerous country in the world. We kill each other with guns, like it's the Wild West, like we don't have law and order.
That's why we have the death penalty. That's why we have the death penalty. I don't understand these liberal rants of yours fail to include 50% of the discussion. Your liberal take and your liberal comment. I just think you're part of the liberal media. You just come up with stories. You come up with these talking points. And govern talking points and Clinton talking points, but you fail to include the full picture.
If we have capital punishment and we're still the number one murder country in the world, doesn't that prove that capital punishment doesn't work? And countries which don't have a murder...
The people that committed the murders should have probably been in jail before for some other crime before the murder.
Well, Mr. Walrus...
If they would have been incarcerated before for some other crime, they wouldn't have murdered.
Well, Mr. Walrus, why do you think our country commits so many murders? Why do you think we're such a violent country? Why do we kill each other? What causes Americans? Is there something in the food that we eat or the air that we breathe? What makes Americans...
According to your liberal media, it's video games or some kind of malarkey.
No, what do you think it is? Why do you think Americans kill each other?
My opinion is they should be locked up.
Okay.
My opinion.
But why are they?
If they shoot somebody, they should be put to death.
Why?
Very simple.
Why are they committing the crimes? Why? What makes them kill each other? Why are Americans so violent?
I'm a capitalist, not a social worker. Okay. The prison system that we have is working quite well. The CCA pays good dividends, and I'm very happy with the way things are working. If I could invest in the drug that they use to put these murderers to sleep, I'd make more money. But apparently, at this time, these companies feel like they shouldn't be making the drug to put these murderers to sleep forever.
Well, we'll keep talking about murderers. Would you know that 60% of the people who are in prison right now are for nonviolent crimes?
Well, yeah, it's because they're smoking dope, probably. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, most of the people who are in jail are for drug charges.
Are you referring to President Nixon's drug war on drugs? Which, by the way, we're winning because of these dope smokers and dope peddlers are in jail now. So what's the math on that one?
Well, do you think that the prison system should have 2 million people in prison?
Yes.
And who should support
it's against the law.
And who should support their families while they're in prison? There's about 2 million children who are growing up without a parent now because their parent is in prison for drug charges.
And what do you think the kids will be doing? They'll be taking up their parents' profession. They'll be selling dope on the street corners. They'll probably get arrested too. So
putting people in prison increases the drug trade because their parents aren't able to be there with their children. They're going to become criminals too because they don't have parents.
Probably.
They got parents.
No parents to tell them between right and wrong because the parents didn't do right. They'll probably end up in prison too.
So shouldn't we try to rehabilitate their parents without putting them in prison?
They're being rehabilitated in prison.
No, they're not being rehabilitated. About 200,000 people in prison are raped, violently raped while they're incarcerated. 200,000. How does that rehabilitate someone? How does telling somebody that they can't get a job when they get out of prison?
Legislation to stop that, and I don't really understand. But that's part of the prison culture. And if you're going to go to prison, that kind of thing happens to you.
1 out of 10 children who are incarcerated are raped. 1 out of every 10 children who are in the juvenile justice system are sexually assaulted while they're in prison.
Mr. Bartlett, again, I'm very upset and irate, and your liberal rants are just infuriating to me. I have to get off the line. Thank you.
Okay, well, Mr. Walrus, thank you for calling. That was really interesting. I'm glad you called in and you expressed your opinion, even though I completely disagree with it, even though I think you're out there. Thanks for calling. That's what democracy's about. It's about open debate. It's about freedom of speech. And I'm glad we had this debate, and other people who are watching the show, they can make up their own minds if they think we're better off living in a country which is a police state where we lock everybody up, which is something third world countries do, or we're better having more compassion. We try to rehabilitate people. If people have a drug problem, let's help them get off the drugs. If people have problems with poverty, let's have them find an alternative other than stealing or selling drugs to support their family. The other thing that makes a country a third world country is this economic inequality. This whole country, the United States was based on the American dream, that if you came to our country, you could become anything if you worked hard enough. If you went to school and you studied and you worked hard, you can go from being poor to being at least middle class and maybe even upper class and rich one day. And that whole idea of social mobility was what was so inviting to people who came to this country. Because in Europe for 1,000 years, if you weren't of noble birth, you were a peasant. And this whole class hierarchy was in Europe, didn't exist in the United States when we were a new nation. That if you came here, you could be noble blood, you could be poor blood, but your success in life was based upon hard work and being smart, not about being lucky as to being born into wealth versus being born into poverty. However, things aren't like that anymore in the United States. We're becoming a country of the haves and the have-nots. The great American middle class that made our country the best country in the world is getting smaller and smaller with each generation. It's harder for people to make ends meet. You look at the economy right now. The economic indicators show economy is doing better. In the state of Florida, for instance, we had 11% unemployment. That's been cut in half. But people don't have money anymore. The jobs that are being created are minimum wage jobs. People are barely surviving. They're working, they have a job, but it doesn't get them out of poverty, it doesn't get them out of debt. People aren't going to be able to retire in our country. We don't have pensions anymore. We don't have union jobs anymore. One parent can't work and let his wife stay at home to raise the children while he works one job and then have enough money to own a home, pay the bills, go on vacation. No, now both parents have to work one or two jobs just to barely get by. And savings? Nobody puts money in savings accounts. That American dream is dying. Even the kids who go to college are getting out, can't find a job. Instead, all they have is massive debt. During the Obama election against Mitt Romney, a lot was made over the one percenters and how the people who are rich looked down on the people who are poor as being moochers or being takers and not job creator heroes. And this idea is destroying our country. This idea of economic inequality is destroying this nation. If you look at the best places for social mobility now, it's no longer the United States. The United States lags behind Europe. You are less likely to go from poor to middle class if you're an American than if you live in a country in Europe. You're less likely to go from middle class to upper class if you live in the United States as opposed to living in Europe. That's the exact opposite of historically what's actually it's been like in our country. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the middle class are barely hanging on by their fingertips, and they're slipping away. They're slipping away as they're getting closer and closer to falling into poverty. I mean, everyone watching the show, I'm sure you feel that too. I'm sure you know how hard it is to pay your bills. Everything's going up in price except your wages. Everything's more expensive. It costs more to go to the grocery store, to fill up your gas tank. But your wages aren't going up. You know how bad it is. You know how hard it is. The people who are small businessmen, who are trying to create jobs, who are trying to earn a buck, you know how hard it is seeing the amount of money that's coming in the door get smaller and smaller each year because your customer base doesn't have the money to pay for your services. You know, I'm an attorney. I know what it's like. I'm a small businessman too. Clients can't afford to hire me if they get arrested. They have to use the public defender. They can't afford to hire an attorney to represent them in a criminal case. You know, why? Because they're not making enough money. Because they're not making enough money, they don't hire my services. And if I can't hire my services, I can't hire more people. I mean, that's how the economy works in our country. The people don't have enough money. The rich have got lots of money. Stocks are going up. If you own stocks, if you're a shareholder in a corporation, you're seeing your portfolio look beautiful. But if you're a regular, hard-working American who's working at a job without any benefits, working at a job where you're making minimum wage or barely over minimum wage, you don't have a pension, where are you going to be 20 years from now? Just living on, or 30 years from now, or when you retire, just living on Social Security without anything put away for a rainy day because you spend more each month than you save? That's not how the American dream is supposed to be. That's getting to be closer to the way a third world country is. A country where you're like a rich Brahmin class like there is in India, or you're a beggar starving in the street. Infrastructure. America used to be the country with the most up-to-date technology, the country which has the best infrastructure in the world. That's what we were known for. We were the modern country. If you were like in Tomorrowland at Disney World, another Disney theme, you'd notice that the United States had the shiniest, the newest, the best of everything. But it's not like that anymore. People who travel around the world notice that our airports are embarrassing compared to the airports over in Asia or over in Europe. Our country's falling apart. Our electrical grid is ancient and is in danger of being destroyed. Our country doesn't have access to public transportation where they have high-speed rail in other countries. Here, you have to drive your car everywhere and you have massive traffic. You're going on these old potholes in the street roads. You're going over bridges that are 50 to 100 years old and are dangerous, and nothing's being done about it. Nothing's being done about making our country's infrastructure better. Our country's falling apart. Everybody knows that we have to have better infrastructure, but the government isn't willing to spend the money, even though that would create jobs, which would help stimulate the economy, which will help everybody. Politics stops them from doing that. They'd rather our country gradually fall apart than allow the government to come in there to make us competitive with the rest of the world again. You look at health care, even with Obamacare that's been passed, America still doesn't have the same life expectancy as other countries. We have a life expectancy in the Deep South similar to third world countries like Bangladesh or African countries. It's actually embarrassing. The amount of pregnant women here, who are unwed, that's an embarrassment as well. We have a country where millions will go without health insurance even after Obamacare because the governors in the states are refusing to accept the free government money to expand Medicaid for the poor. So the poor won't be able to get the free health care that Obama promised that by law they should be entitled to, that Obamacare was designed to do. The governors aren't going to do that. They would rather people get sick and die or get sick and lose everything they own than to give people this health insurance. So America, third world country, I don't know. I might be exaggerating things, but we got to be careful. We got to pay attention to who we are and where we're going, because if we don't, 20 years from now we're going to wake up and it's going to be too late to do anything about it. So, like I tell everybody at the end of every show, you have three choices in life. You could either go along with the flow and be part of the problem instead of being part of the solution, or you can ignore the problems and put your head in the sand and be an ostrich, or you can rise to your feet, you can raise your fists in the air, and you can choose to fight back. Thank you. I'll see you next week.
This program was brought to you by the Internet Broadcasting Organization, setting the standard for new media broadcasting.